This video is part of a series on experiences of the Enneagram from the 27 subtypes. I'm aiming to interview people of each subtype, so you get to hear and experience what those different voices and life experiences sound like. I hope you enjoy. Hey Madeline, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for your time in sharing with us today. Could you share with us the country that you live in, your Enneagram type, subtype, and instinctual sequence?
Hi, Matt. I'm so happy to do this with you. Um, I live in the United States, in Georgia for the moment. I am a sexual nine and self preservation repressed.
Thank you. When it comes to the Enneagram, when did you first hear about it?
Um, Not that long ago compared to a lot of people, 2017,
Okay.
learned about it.
And since 2017, what's been your experience with it?
Well, it's changed, right? Like I learned about it the way I think most people learn about it through Instagram and podcasts and
Yeah.
friends and treated it the way I had Myers Briggs or other personality tests as one more way to get to know myself better. And it didn't turn out to have the substance at all that I ended up recognizing when I joined CP Enneagram, which was pretty quick. Like I
Mhm.
got obsessed pretty quickly and just was studying on my own to a degree that I felt like I couldn't do enough and looked for the school that I'd want to study with and ended up being with them. And I guess the main thing I'd want to share about what the Enneagram has given me is I had done a lot of seeking and studying and spiritual work before and done self observation. But in my self observation, I realize now I was only seeing, what my personality and my ego wanted me to see. I wasn't seeing my blind spots or my shadow at all. And it's
Mm.
as a result of seeing in my type these attributes that I wouldn't have thought were me and having to really sit with them a while, I realized, oh, those are things I never would have acknowledged at all. And they're absolutely who I am. So that's been the greatest part is making me look at stuff I wouldn't have looked at.
Yeah. Thank you
Mm.
so much for sharing that, Madeline. And I resonate with something that you said about being obsessed with it, because that's basically what happened to me. I've just
Yeah.
become like really into it. In what specific areas has the Enneagram been like the most helpful for you in your life?
Well, probably relationships primarily, like my relationship with my brother, with my husband, with my children, with friends, especially my brother, where understanding their Enneagram type, all these people allowed me to type them. And it was just a huge recognition of where they were coming from, that we come from very
Mm.
different places, and that a lot of what I was taking personally, I shouldn't be taking personally. Like with my brother, who's an eight, his whole thing that was going on that felt really intimidating and aggressive, I got to understand what was underneath that and kind of empathized with him because I go to eight as well, and I recognized that thing that happens with our energy as a body type, and um, things have just improved dramatically in our relationship.
That's lovely to hear. So I'm
Mm.
hearing like one of the key ways it's been really helpful for you is in your relationships, and it's that your relationships have improved since learning about the Enneagram, about your internal workings, the internal workings of people that you love, and how the relationships have improved as a result of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Their
Ha-
motivations, understanding their motivations more too. Yeah.
yeah, especially with a type 8, and finding them less offensive, or finding their approach,
Um,
not taking it as personally, because they're not necessarily meaning it to be received in the way that it can be received by some people, because
Exactly.
it's
Like
such a big.
recognizing he doesn't even know what he's doing, right? He
No.
doesn't
Yeah.
experience it the way we experience it. And because eight is my wing, and more I'm seeing how much
Wow.
I do go to eight and do go to one. And I know that feeling
Wow.
of someone being like, whoa, back off, and not even knowing what they're talking about, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Um, and I've just had this thing come into my mind about an eight. Maybe um, I don't think I've ever thought this before, but anyway. Maybe the reason why an eight doesn't realize how big they are or how much of an impact that they have on people is because somehow, whether they're aware of it or not, they're this like small vulnerable person that has to have this big presentation on them. So
Yeah.
they might feel like maybe subconsciously just quite small, but they kind of go big to compensate for it. But when we receive the bigness of it, it's like, oh, whoa. Because I've met people in my past that I'm sure have been eights, especially sexual eights,
Yeah.
and I have felt physically scared of them.
Yeah.
But what I noticed in me with my sexual repressed instinct is my sexual repressed instinct came online more in like a survival strategy to kind of
Huh.
deal with the fact that this massive energy, like threatening,
Yeah.
aggressive, assertive energy, is focusing on me, and I'm going, "Am I safe here?" So it's interesting
That's a
how
good
that,
thing that your sexual energy would come up, that that's repressed, because that's what an
yeah,
eight wants. They want you to
yeah,
come meet them where they are. They love
yeah,
that.
yeah, they do exactly. And I've always found, I've always gotten really well with eights because I'm not threatening to them. There's nothing for them to feel threatened by with me. Yeah, and but I'm feeling threatened, and I'm having to in a friendly way, not in a like a really scared way, unless I am really scared and just not aware of it. But just that kind of sexual kind of instinct can come in. So yeah, I resonate with what you're sharing about experiencing the energy of the eight, and interesting how have you had the feedback as well from people that Madeline, you're so intense. Have you had
Yeah.
that feedback?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder
I
if
think,
that's coming from the
yeah,
sexual energy that you have leading with the sexual dominance.
I think so. And it's funny because, they say about sexual nines that they're really shy.
Yeah,
And it was hard for me to wrap my brain about that, around that, when I thought about how intense I can be. But then,
yeah,
through living as a sexual nine for a bit now, I've recognized how often I really am shy, and that
yeah,
I compensate when I get in the moment and somehow then become more secure as that takes over. But I'm incredibly shy beforehand.
yeah.
Yeah.
And because I know a bit more about your story, there's other reasons why you might be showing up as more
Yeah.
confident and more assertive, maybe, or more, people might experience you as
Um,
being more intense.
yeah.
Would you mind like sharing about what those some of those reasons
Yeah.
are?
So I think most of my family are sexual dominant, for one thing. So that was
Yeah.
just our
Okay.
life growing up. There was a lot of
Yeah.
conflict and chaos, and none of that was wrong in my family. So that
Mm,
was one reason I didn't think that I was afraid of conflict, because it became so normal for me. I never liked it though. Compared to them, I was shredding my napkin under the table every dinner, and um, but it wasn't the typical running away from conflicts that you see in nines. And also, a lot of my family were in theater and dance and performance,
mm,
so it was just normal to be in front of a crowd and be the center of attention, and learn to be okay with that.
yeah.
And I think that's impacted the way I come off.
Mm. No, and that's going to be really helpful for people to understand that the sexual nine probably won't show up necessarily exactly like you do, but because of the family influence that you've had,
Mhm.
sexual dominant family. I mean, what were their subtypes? Do you know what their subtypes were?
My mother died a long time ago, and I'm torn with her whether she was a
Okay.
sexual four. My father definitely, I've typed him,
Yeah.
was and is a sexual four, and I
Okay.
think it's with her. It's either a four or a two, but she often
Right.
came off like an eight as well. She was a
Wow.
very
Okay.
strong, confident woman, and my
Yeah.
brother's an eight, and
There we go.
other family members are eights. I have a son who's an eight, so, and definitely sexual eight. So yeah, there's a lot of that energy.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
obviously, yeah, and that speaks to the complexity of people finding it hard, including us, to locate our
Mm.
types, because and as you'll know, there's a number of different reasons, aren't there, why it can be challenging to find type, and you're one of those reasons because of the way that you're experienced in the drama world, and having to be on a stage and being confident and being in the crowd, which a nine necessarily wouldn't want to do in personality. But
Yeah,
you were trained not to do that. It was almost as if you were trained not to be a sexual nine with your drama experience
exactly.
and the sexual family. So those two big components coming in, making your sexual nine presentation more complex, and
Yeah.
obviously, and not just that, but the growth path that you've been on as well. Um, and you've mentioned about spirituality and just how you've grown over your lifetime as well. So those three components at least would have shaped, how you present and how you come off.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we talked about this before, that the way, whatever your type is going to influence the way you go about typing yourself and the way you go about doing the Enneagram. And so
Yeah.
as a nine, I'm only just understanding just how disconnected from what I really am I have been in different times in my life. So
Yeah.
I didn't see the nine in me because I was merged with other people and other ideas of what I was. So
Wow.
it's been huge. And now I'm seeing how
Yeah.
much I do go to 8 and 1 and 6, especially throughout my life, how I would go
Mm.
to them in stress and not have understood what that was all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've heard it said, you've probably heard it said as well, that nines, as they grow, they are very energetic. They have a lot of energy, um, and it's the complete opposite of the passion of sloth, isn't it? It's just this massive
Yeah.
energy, um, you know, and so that is within the type nine as well, but it's kind of suppressed, or when it comes online, there is that piece to it. But I find it interesting because I've heard someone else talk about sexual nines before, actually, and maybe they are potentially, depending on the context of the person's life story,
Yeah.
possibly not the hardest type to find. There's probably different types that are harder to locate for different reasons. But maybe, as you've said, one of the reasons why it can be hard for a sexual nine to realize they're a sexual nine is because if they're merged, like as with you, with assertive family members, merging with these certain powerful presentations, well, I mean, that's gonna have shaped.
That's the way they identify themselves then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the big merging when I was young was with my mom, which is probably true of a lot of us,
Yeah.
whatever type you are. We're very influenced by our mothers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But for a sexual nine, now I understand, I was literally merged with her, where I saw life through her eyes. And it was
Wow.
her dream to become an actress. And I found myself
Wow,
going to
Madeline.
New York and becoming an actress, and
Wow.
only recognizing after I kept not showing up at auditions and was finding myself in bookstores, in old antique bookstores, and
Yeah.
wanting to do photography classes. This was not my dream, right? And there was actually a day when I was in New York in my 20s when I had this incredible realization. I can't remember what I was going to do, but I remember thinking through her eyes in such a vivid way that I was able to see it. For some reason, I was able to observe that I was looking through her eyes at what I should do, whether it was something I was going to buy to wear or somewhere I was going to go. I was definitely looking through her eyes, and it kind of freaked me out. Like, I
Mm.
realized just how strongly I wouldn't have had the language then, but how strongly I did know who I was, right?
Yeah.
And how much I was dependent on her point of view. So I feel like that was such a gift in my 20s, and that helped me get over it to a certain degree because I'd been so merged. It kind of helped me not go there again as much. And
Yeah.
then when I look at later relationships, the earlier ones, I definitely did merge with them, and it's gotten so much better over the years. But yeah, serious
Mm.
merging.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that, Madeline. So, as we're talking about the sexual nine, what was the experience of discovering your type? What's that kind of journey been like?
I it wasn't short. I thought I was a 4 for about 2 years, and
Interesting. Mention the
yeah,
fours.
the sexual 9 can be mistaken for 4.
Yeah,
They're very similar in some
yeah.
ways.
So there's a
Um,
lookalike type there, plus the parent piece as well coming in there
plus the parent piece.
as well.
Yes, it might be
Yeah.
both parents, yeah. Um, so yeah, for 2 years that really made sense, but I didn't relate to the subtypes. I related to the
Okay.
general things about a 4, but I didn't really relate to envy, which is a pretty big part of it. And I
Yeah.
didn't relate to the subtypes. I related to the intensity and the drama and the feelings. I definitely felt deeply. Um, and then I got into CP Enneagram and was trying to make sure that I was a 4 once I learned about the subtypes and related more to 7 than 4.
Mm.
So for, I think, I don't know, like 8 months, I was a 7, social 7, totally different subtype, different dominant instinct.
Yeah.
And meeting other people of that type helped me to recognize that I wasn't a social 7. And people kept
Mm.
saying, no, they're like, my coach in we had the same coach. She didn't think I was a social 7. She thought I was an 8. And I took a test,
Oh
the,
wow. Okay.
the
Yeah.
compass
Interesting.
test, and I got 8. But I think I took the test, and this is a big merging thing too,
Yeah.
thinking that I was an 8. And so I went in answering questions that way. And honestly, it was in one of the intensive classes that I was in CP Enneagram when I heard other sexual 9s speaking and other 9s
Okay.
in general that finally I was like, oh, I didn't think I was afraid of conflict, but I really relate to a lot of what they're saying.
Mm.
So that was it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're trying four on for a while, and as you
Hmm.
said, like the sexual nine and type four can be lookalikes, and also with the parental overlay of the fours as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then seven came online.
Hmm.
Were there any other numbers that you were exploring as well?
There were. I've left a few out. So then Uranio typed me, and I
Okay.
thought he was just going to type me as a favor, but he ended up videotaping it as
Yeah.
a learning tool for other people to help type people.
Okay.
So I felt so horrible about this, but I think there's a part of me that really relates to 5, the healthier 9 in me that has learned that I need to be alone more. I love research. I love knowledge. I always have. So that part of me, when I was with Uranio, really emerged, and he typed me
Yeah.
as a 5, and totally due to the responses I was giving. I also think as a sexual 9, this is kind of interesting to hear about sexual 9s, that I wanted it to go well, right? Like I was thinking more about how it would be for him and how the video would be for everyone else, more than
Okay.
just really being in who I was, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big lesson. I was a 5 for about 6 months. I was in a breakout room in a class with a bunch of 5s and realized, ooh, this is not me. I I
Yeah.
really respect and understand them now, but it's not who I am.
Mm.
And then 9 was the next.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think the experience that you've had of going around the different types, um, as you said before, we approach the Enneagram and we approach looking for our type as our type.
Yeah.
And as you're speaking from the sexual nine perspective, that merging with the person typing you and wanting doing the sexual nine piece, of that merging and everything that you've
Mhm.
shared, and it can just make it more complicated. Not truly being in touch with. Hang on a minute, is this true for me, or am I somehow making this,
Well,
a better
externally,
experience?
yeah,
Yeah,
like being too externally aware as opposed to what's really going on inside. Yeah.
yeah. So all of the experience that you've had, although it wasn't like, yeah, I came to the Enneagram, I discovered my type in 5 minutes, because that wasn't my experience either, for different reasons. But I
Yeah.
think what it does is, for those of us where it does take a longer time, years, it can
Hmm.
take years. It I've known somebody that's gone as a type for 20 years, to realize, oh,
And then
I'm not that
changed
type.
it.
I'm that
Oh,
type. Um, so,
wow.
and this is someone, this is a professional. This is someone that knows, that knows their stuff. And
Yeah.
so it
I
just
can see how
speaks,
it would happen. Yeah.
yeah. So when it came into CP world, um, obviously they encountered the Enneagram as their type and had a conversation with somebody, and then 20 years goes by as their type. So
Yeah.
it just speaks to this self awareness piece, is is not easy. It does take time. Even when we locate our core type, it's
Yeah.
still, like, in some ways that's just the beginning of the journey of self awareness. Like,
Oh, yeah, for
you
sure.
know,
Well, then you start to see all those things that you were in denial about, the blind
yeah,
spots, right?
yeah, that's a whole journey, isn't it?
That's what I love
Seeing,
about it. Yeah.
like, locating our type, that can take literally years, and then locating our patterns in that type, and the deeper motivations. It's a worthwhile journey, but it's not a 5-minute one.
No, it's really not. But
No,
I do just really want to say that I think the subtypes are what are key and the
yeah, I
dominant.
agree.
And I
Yeah,
feel so lucky to have found being Uranio and discovered that
yeah,
part, or I don't think I ever would have found my type, you
yeah.
know?
I completely resonate with that, Madeline. I completely agree. If it wasn't for the subtypes that I've learned through B's work and CP Enneagram Academy, I think I'd probably still be looking for my type. I
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm likewise. I'm very grateful for the subtypes. I think
Mhm.
it just adds a level of clarity that without it, it's not necessarily for all types, for all people. Some people, I've heard type 5 say, I've opened the book, saw type 5, yeah, I'm 5. And they were straight
Right.
away. But obviously, with my type, it's self preservation 6. I mean, questioning and doubting is a hallmark for self preservation 6. So, no wonder why I kept questioning and doubting, not just my type, but everything,
No,
you know?
absolutely. And all
So,
the
no wonder why I
self-preservation
questioned and
sixes,
doubted it.
they're
Like,
all like that. And every self-preservation six I know, and they're my favorite. I love self-preservation. My best friend is a self-preservation six. And
uh,
yeah, that's just it goes with the territory. So
yeah.
yeah, it's probably always gonna be that way to a certain degree, you know?
Yeah, and I think it just, like, for you and I, obviously we're not the only ones, but where it has taken us longer to find our type, and CP's subtypes have really helped us finally land on that.
Mhm.
That experience of us being different types hasn't gone to waste,
Oh,
because we've gained a level of self awareness that we might not have had without kind of thinking we were a different type. And I
yeah.
love, like, you're a professional with the Enneagram as well, and I just want to thank you for your openness and vulnerability in saying, yeah, I thought I was this, I thought I was this, thought I was that, but actually I'm this. And hopefully, people listening will give people permission, um, to to have that, to not just necessarily have read a book and gone, or take a test and gone, yeah, I'm that type. Um, case closed. Like, I think it
Yeah.
invites. I think our stories, is an invitation for people to kind of dig a bit deeper, because there might be, below the surface, because types can have the same behaviors, can't they?
Oh,
But
totally.
same
It's not
behaviors, but
black
the
and white.
motivations, no,
Yeah, it's not black and white. Like these
no,
words that go with the types can sometimes throw you because
yeah,
people interpret the words differently, or
yeah,
they've grown past that being an issue. Like
or self
um,
awareness piece,
self-awareness,
yeah,
exactly. But I think for anyone listening who is having trouble, it is such a gift in the end. It's kind of an identity crisis and torture during. I mean, it was for me,
yeah,
but I'm so grateful for it as a coach because it's given me such deeper understanding of other types, right? Like I feel like I
yeah,
saw through a 4, a 5, a 6 for a while. I left that one out.
yeah,
Of
okay,
like I really saw through the eyes of those types, and it's given me new appreciation when I'm typing someone of all of the different factors, cultural
mm,
overlay, family, so many things come into
yeah.
play, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And as people that are professionals, where we will guide people to their core type, the fact that we've got our own experience on top of our education is going to make us better at guiding people to their core type because of the experience and teaching that we've had. So I'm grateful for that. I'm actually grateful for the journey of it taking me a longer time, even though I wanted to find my type really quick.
Me
And
too.
it
And I
sounds like
remember,
the same for you.
well, I got there. I remember
Yeah,
being, saying in the beginning to people who, I thought I knew my type. I was a
yeah,
7 at
yeah,
that point. But
yeah. I had that
them
experience.
saying, how valuable it is, the journey to get there. And then as it was so difficult, thinking it's not, what do you mean valuable? This is torture. But it's so worth it, because any
Yeah,
real
it
self
is.
awareness is going to be struggle, because we all have ways in which we're not looking at the truth, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was just
absolutely.
the struggle that I had to go through to get to that.
Yeah, and thank you for using that word because it is a struggle. You know,
Mm.
although I think we both agree it's such a worthwhile journey. It's
Yeah,
such a worthwhile journey, but it is not easy,
yeah,
and it is painful. It's a struggle. It is a struggle.
yeah. It
You know,
is.
I'm
Truth
just
is hard. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It is. It can be so hard, and I just had this like image come to mind as you were sharing. When we kind of just being our heads are above the water and we're reading information about the Enneagram above the water, like the behavioral kind of descriptions, and going, oh yeah, I'm that type. But really, when we go deeper, there's a
Mhm.
whole different world to the types and to ourselves, and it's like, ah, yes,
And that we may not even be seeing, right? That we're
exactly,
doing
yeah,
and not aware of, like we were saying about
yeah,
the age. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So basically, I don't know if this is the same for you, but I would say recently, um, I've had the feedback from people that do not know the Enneagram. Matt, you are so in your head, and
Mm.
maybe I shouldn't have find this as a compliment because it wasn't meant as a compliment, but there was something about
It's
this.
reassuring.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Something about going, ah, so I am a head type, and it's like the questioning can stop.
Yeah. No,
um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yes. All
even
those things that happened that I realized are not necessarily my best aspects, but they're proof that I'm a body type,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
oh, yeah.
absolutely.
And so it's kind of confirmation, but obviously it's like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be rejoicing that I'm a self-preservation 6. I should be like, it's not necessarily something to rejoice over, it's something to weep over. It's like, oh no. But I guess it's good to locate the box we're in so we can
Exactly.
to locate what our patterns are and to be able to see them like clearly and then go, okay, now we can go in a different direction. But that doesn't mean it's easy because they're
No.
so ingrained, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, what's been what's been like some of the most helpful things for you as a sexual 9? Like when you landed with sexual 9, how has knowing that you're a sexual 9 been really helpful in your life?
Well, it's helped explain my relationship with my mother and why it
Okay,
was so different
yeah,
than my friends' relationships with their parents. I mean, my friends would even say to me, "You're too close to your mom." And I would be like, "Oh, you're just jealous." I mean, it's so great that I have this amazing relationship with my mother. So it's helped me to understand the trip I was playing, um,
mm,
and the negative aspects of that, to also see it in other relationships I was in, and hopefully see it now and not judge it and not have that happen as much in my relationships now, right? Um, so seeing the merging, also just seeing in a fun way the way I merge with everything, like books that I'm reading, music that I'm into, nature. We went to
mm,
Asheville on a trip and we're in the woods. We were there just for a weekend, and I had such a powerful experience. I can't believe I'm going to share this. I had such a powerful experience merging with nature in the woods that day. And it was truly a spiritual experience where I didn't even know the words were going to come out, but I said, we need to move to Asheville. And 2 weeks later, we had found a house and bought it. And
wow,
it's been a few months now of catching up with that. But that was very body type,
yeah,
jumping into action.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
was merging, I think, in a healthy way. with a part of myself that I don't experience in the city here in Atlanta. So,
Mm.
I can look back and see all the things that led up to that moment, but um,
Yeah.
merging with nature is something that I am wanting. That's something I
Yeah.
want.
What I'd love to hear. What was that? What was the like the what was the experience like of that? Like
In the
how did
woods.
it? How did it? What was the experience of it? The
Yeah.
sense, the actual
It was
physical.
it was totally sensory. Like, it's gonna be
Yeah.
hard to articulate it. It was
Yeah.
totally a sensual experience where we were in the woods. It was not even a walk we planned, we just had been in the car for so long, and before we had to go where we had to go, we just thought it had been really hot in Atlanta, and it wasn't there, and we just wanted to go for a walk, and it was just seeing and smelling and being aware of the birds, the sound of the birds. It's not like I haven't been in nature before, but there was something about those woods. It's the oldest woods in the world. Like, those
Wow.
mountains, it turns out, I didn't know this at the time, are the
Wow.
most ancient in the world. That's why they're the most worn down, as opposed to like out west for the Himalayas. They're really smaller compared to those. Um,
Wow.
so I think I just tapped into something that's there all the time, and I was just ready for it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was a gift that I got to
Yeah.
have.
Um, in terms of a feeling, even though it was like like a sensual things, like a sensations. Did you were you aware of your thinking and your feeling before going into that experience, and how were you different coming out of it? Like, how did it how did it impact you? How did it impact your being?
Well, in the experience, I wasn't in my head. It was
Yeah.
just like emerging with the trees. I could tell you about the tree that I was next to. I mean, it was such a sensual experience of these specific trees. There was all these different trees together in a clump, and um, just the groundedness of these. It sounds so crazy. I mean, I've been in woods before, and this hasn't happened. And I've always loved nature, but this was different. It was just an awareness that I needed to be there. That this was this was sanity.
Yeah.
This just felt like sanity. This felt like outside of some kind of gerbil wheel that I'm usually on, and it felt right, and like something I wanted more of, like getting a taste of the greatest chocolate souffle ever, and you have like one little bite, and you're like, oh, years later, I have to find that recipe again and have that chocolate souffle. It was like that. Like, I got a taste of something I'd never experienced quite that way, and I just wanted more of it. And then my brain, when I got home and we, put into action moving there, it's been a real experience of understanding sexual nine, actually, because then my brain kicked in and thought about all the people that I'm leaving and
Yeah.
questioned it like crazy,
Yeah.
but it was in motion, right? Like, I'm kind of grateful that I went into action immediately and made this happen, because if I'd used my brain, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it isn't logical.
Mm-mm.
What you experienced is not logical.
Mm-mm.
That doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it's not valid because it's not logical. I'm not saying that, but it's not literally. It's not. It's logical in a different kind of way. It's logical in a body intelligence way, not
It's body
logical
intelligence.
in
Yeah.
a like a mental, like it might it doesn't this doesn't make sense up here, but here it does.
Yeah, my
In my
body felt
body, it
different. It was
makes
definitely
sense.
in my body. Yeah. Like, my
Yeah.
body just felt different. I mean, one other aspect of it is that I'd been having some health issues. And when I was in those woods, my energy had been really down the month before.
Okay.
And when I was in those woods, and it wasn't just, I mean, it had only been hot for a week. It wasn't just that it was summer. And so my energy was down from that. I'd been having some serious energy things happening. And in those woods, I just felt incredibly enlivened. Like, my body was what it used to be. And I've been fine since. Like,
Wow. It's
yeah.
amazing. I mean, I didn't know a great deal about it, but it's probably going to be different for different people depending on their their worldview, their faith, and everything. Um, but I personally believe that nature was created by a living being that I call God, and so there is something of that godlike quality in nature.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
like nature is literally alive. It.
Mhm.
Of course, it's alive. I mean, but it's alive,
In a
and
different
it's
way.
in a
We
different
come in
way.
and
Yeah,
screw it up, but,
it
in its real form,
it is alive, isn't it? It's a living.
absolutely. It
It's a
has everything
living.
to teach us. We are the students. That's where we need to go learn. That's my church.
Yeah. What a
Yeah.
beautiful church out in what I would call creation, outside. I mean, there's something about a clear night sky and no light pollution, nothing man-made, just looking at the stars. I don't do it often enough, but it's amazing.
Mm.
It's amazing. Like nature, creation, to be out in it and to be with it is awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, totally awesome.
Yeah. We saw
Um,
stars there too. That was part of it. We got to
you
see the
saw
stars.
stars as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not in that moment, but that night when we were at our Airbnb,
Wow.
we saw the stars, and we don't see them
Be-
here very much. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Um, so, what other ways has knowing you're a sexual nine been really helpful, or maybe even life changing for you?
Well, I've recognized, the part of me that thought I was a 5
Yeah.
is the part that really needs time alone, and I, like everyone, became more aware of that during COVID, where I just was alone more, and I was a health
Yeah.
coach at the time, and I was working online. Um, but now I realize that I started to get to know who I really was and find my right action. That's the thing that the 9 is supposed to be looking for. Instead of doing everything but the right action, the only way that I can get there, and a lot of 9s can get there, is to be alone, because I'm not letting in the sounds and the needs of everyone around me the way I usually do. So I'm respecting that a lot. Like right now, I'm in a
Mm,
studio that we created for me. Now, of course, we're leaving it and going to Asheville. Not logical.
mm,
Um, we made it a year ago, and this was so that I would have a place where I could do my art and do my coaching in a private place where I felt that it could just be
yeah.
me.
That's lovely, Madeline. And I mean, I think for a sexual nine, that must just be so important to have literally your own space.
Yeah.
I mean, for people that aren't a sexual nine or that don't necessarily know what we're talking about, because a sexual nine merging with other people, like it, unless unless someone has the experience of it because they're doing it as a sexual nine, or they've kind of listened to people that are talking from the sexual nine space as you're sharing now, or have been with other people that are sexual nines and hearing them explain what it's like as a sexual nine. I mean, it's not my experience as a self-preservation six. So I think only a sexual nine will really know what it's like to be a sexual nine because they are a sexual nine.
So do you
And
want to go ahead?
yeah, and so just having for anyone that's listening to us that might be going, like, why is it important for a sexual nine to have their own time? Like, what's it like for you to be around? Maybe not so much now because you've grown in awareness and you're kind of more aware of yourself. But before, how would you have described what you were like in relationships, um, or even walking around the street, just being you with other people? What was it like as a sexual nine, even if you didn't know that you were at that point a sexual nine?
Right. Well, I think it's empathy. I think it's being incredibly empathetic, but in a different way than a heart type.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
instead of it being feeling like, whatever someone's feeling, I think heart types start feeling that emotion depending on which one to determines the degree to which they feel other people's emotions. With with a sexual 9, it's actually a sensual experience where you're feeling the energy of someone else. So
Right.
someone
Okay. Yeah.
if you're in a room with other people, their energy is affecting who you are more than
Right.
the energy coming from you. You're being affected by the energy around you. And this was definitely true, as you're saying, when I was younger to a much bigger degree. And the most extreme example of that is when I was, how old was I? God, like 12. And I stepped on a needle. It broke. The needle was in my foot, half of it. And they had to get it out because it was going to go through my bloodstream and maybe go to my heart. It was pretty serious surgery that they had to do quickly. And I was in a children's hospital that was a teaching hospital. So there were all of these doctors in the room when this surgery took place. And it was new kind of surgery with cameras. I'm 60 in a few days. So this was new at the time, little micro cameras to show with, you know, tiny parts of a tiny heel what was going on. So the room was packed with doctors, and my awareness was just the energy of everyone being really excited about this surgery. And um, to the degree that then, when they put the scalpel in my heel and I felt it, instead of like a normal person screaming and saying, the Novocaine didn't work, or, I'm feeling this, it's painful. I just, because I didn't want to interrupt in some way, I just closed my eyes really tight and my tears were pouring down. And a nurse saw me and said, "Can you feel this?" And I nodded, and she was mad at me and gave me more Novocaine or whatever they give, and it went
Gosh.
away. But now I see, like, that's how much a sexual nine can disassociate, right? I think that's what they mean by disassociate,
Yeah.
where, it's about what's going on around you. And thankfully, I've come a long way
Yeah.
since that.
I'm pleased to hear that. And although you didn't use this language, and it might be there's like when the word peace is used, there's different ways that peace can be explained or communicated. I think, but it's almost like keeping the peace
Yes,
at
absolutely.
and paying a very high price for it. Like there's a
That's so well
high
put.
price to be paid for
Exactly.
that.
I didn't even think of it in those terms, but that's exactly
Yeah.
what it was. It was that I didn't want to disturb what was going on in the room, the peace, right? I
Yeah.
don't want to be the reason everyone
The piece.
freaks
Yeah.
out. And
And it comes in that moment in time, it came at a big cost to you. But I dare
huge,
say there have been other moments in your life and in other nine's lives where they're keeping the peace at what cost?
right, right. And not even
Yeah,
aware they're doing it, you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because exactly, it's almost like being when we're in our personality. It's like we're in the sea, like fish in the sea, and we don't know that. Like we don't know that we're in the water. If that makes
I don't know
sense.
we're in the water. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't think I knew until recently how good I am at giving people what they need. I sense
Mm,
immediately, energetically what people need, and I arrange for that to happen, or I know how to make them happy. I know how to create, change the situation so there is peace. And it
yeah.
happens so automatically, I wasn't aware of doing it. It's just like breathing, like you're saying, you know.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Madeline. Is there anything else about being a Section 9 that I haven't asked that you'd like to share?
Um, I guess about anger and judgment, that
Yeah.
those are aspects of me that I have been in growth allowing out a lot more. And I'm realizing how much more energy I have as a result of doing that. I had chronic fatigue for years when I was younger. And I truly think that that was a big piece of it, that I was repressing anger and not wanting to rock the boat, and just putting all of my energy out there instead of in here. So as that's come out, like, I think what happens for all the types, as you really start to let it go, you go a little too extreme sometimes. And I'm just very aware of how judgmental and angry I really am underneath after
Yeah.
not experiencing that in a big way. So I would just say to people with nines to encourage that, because it's hard to stay the course with that when you're used to wanting to make things comfortable for yourself and everyone around you. It's hard to let it keep going. And I think it's super valuable to do it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, Madeline, and thank you for sharing that. because I think what you've said there is yet another piece to the complexity of um, your presentation of a sexual nine, not only with the sexual family that you had, a sexual dominant family that you had, and their impact, um, and your training in drama, but also um, the growth path that you've been on, and a lot you said about bringing the energy in. I mean, nines have got big energy, and as you're experiencing when they do the growth work, when they grow, they're getting in touch with all of this energy that, especially for a section line, as you've said, that was going out, but now it's
Yeah.
coming in, and there's this energy plus the nines, as you'll know, being in the anger triad and being more in touch with anger and realizing how judgmental you actually are. And that's a
Yeah.
big piece for a nine. Like, people wouldn't think that nines were judgmental, but they are. And I
Uh-huh.
think it's really good that it's another self-awareness piece. It's not necessarily a comfortable thing to see in ourselves, or for people that we're in a relationship with to experience if we're a nine. Not that I'm a nine, but I know someone close to me who's a nine, and she isn't into the Enneagram like I am. She doesn't know the CP levels of awareness in terms of the growth path and how each type changes when they do inner growth work. And what I find fascinating is I can map her out onto the growth path because of the work that she's done, the psychological work that she's done in herself.
Of the growth path
She's
of the nine?
of the nine. She's becoming
Okay.
more in touch with her anger. She's becoming better at making boundaries. And, this kind of gentle, easygoing person that is still there. They're still
Right.
there. And she's beautiful. She's lovely. But there's also this strength of character. Not character as in, I don't mean character. There's this strength of presentation, this
Right.
boundary, this anger, assertiveness, opinionated.
Yeah.
I can see a clear change. And I think people that are in a relationship with a nine that don't know that this is what happens to a nine when they grow, they might go, "Who is this person? This isn't the person. I don't recognize
Exact.
you."
Yeah. Yeah.
But as you've said, Madeline, it's not necessarily easy being on the growth path for ourselves or people that we're used to being a certain way and they start experiencing us in different ways. It's not necessarily easy, and it might look ugly in some ways, but actually it's really good because it's all part of growing internally, isn't it?
And
You know?
becoming who you really are, right? And being
Yeah,
a lot more interesting to be with, because you're gonna have
yeah,
so many more facets of your personality come out, because it's not all gonna be about the other person, right? How
yeah,
boring is that when the person's just merged with you and you don't get to see who they really are?
yeah,
Um, but I guess I just really want to add one piece to that, of the comfort thing, that nines really like to be comfortable. And I've become much more aware of that too. That was a blind spot for me, but I do love my comfort. And part of being comfortable is not wanting to rock the boat and not wanting to see people reacting to your anger, reacting to judgment, or hearing it. And so it's, with the nines in your life, just if there's any way you can be conscious of that, that you aren't going to be running away, because that's what nines are afraid of, is separation. So
yeah,
that's the last piece, is just to know that they'll hide all of that in order to not lose you, and it's not to your benefit, because you're not getting them as they are.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
what you're sharing is so profound. Um, and it's so true, Madeline. It's so true. And it it makes me feel so sad because I've got nines in my life that I love dearly, and it's loving them is encouraging them to have their voice and to have their stand, even if it's not necessarily, even if it doesn't make my life easier.
Right.
It's actually better for them, and to kind of reassure them, as you've said, that your anger, like, it's a bit more complicated for me as a self-preservation 6 because
I was gonna say,
similar to a 9, I'm also on a growth path with anger as well. And I think this is good for people to hear that are listening to this conversation. Um, with sexual 9 or the type 9s with the not so much the sexual 6, but for me as a self-preservation 6, okay, so I've been repressing anger, different reason that a 9 would, but repressing anger. Um, and so part of my growth is to be in touch with anger, but
yeah,
because it's a bit like trying on a coat that's too big, when I start expressing anger, it can come out as, and I think,
messy.
yeah, and it's like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with this. But I guess it's part of that kind of growth, growth of when we kind of try it on and express what's inside of us or engage with this reality that's inside of us. It can come out a bit wobbly to start with,
Yeah,
but then as we kind of mature in it and get practiced in it, it sort of settles down. And I think what I'm trying to say with this is just to encourage the 9s in our lives, or if you're in a relationship with anyone listening to this, in a relationship with a 9, to encourage them to just express themselves, and that we're not going to run away as a result. What they fear isn't going to be a reality, and to have that, this is where the Enneagram is so helpful in relationships. To have the Enneagram as a communication language, and it's a deep communication
yeah,
language, and I feel like I'm still scratching the surface with it because
yeah,
it's it's actually such a helpful tool. It's so helpful. It's very deeply profound to be able to say to someone, the thing that you fear the most that I didn't know that you feared, but I do now. Well, guess what? It ain't gonna happen. Like, what a relief
right.
and permission
Yeah,
giving is what you're saying. Like, the permission, if you're a 9, to allow yourself to go to those spaces, or if you're in a relationship with a 9, to encourage them to go to those spaces. I think it's just going to deepen the relationship, and more importantly, deepen the connection.
yeah, absolutely. And it is so complicated. Like you as a 6, if
Yeah,
you're with a 9 and they're expressing anger in a way
yeah,
that's overcoming your boundaries, it's okay. It's like it's a tennis match, right? Like it's not
yeah,
black and white. It's saying without wanting to shut you down completely, you're a little much now. So let's just talk this through and still have your feelings, but I need to be there with you. We just get so
yeah,
black or white about it, right?
yeah,
Rather than being the discomfort of practicing this stuff, right? It's just practice, like practicing push-ups
yeah,
or handwriting, anything. Like it's just practice with emotions as well, if you're not used to having them.
yeah. And that's another profound thing. There's grace in the practice. I mean, you know, we're not gonna go from crawling to running a marathon.
Right.
We've got to learn to walk first. And I know it's a well used analogy, but it's true. It takes practice, and it does take practice, and it takes time. Um, but it's such an important journey, and I think it can save relationships. I think it can save relationships.
And it's imperfect, right? Like you have to be okay. It's the same thing with ones, right?
Yeah,
That it's got to be okay to do it and not get it right, to make a mess of it while you're
yeah,
getting.
yeah, absolutely. And having that understanding of all of the different types and the subtypes, and to be able to communicate, to have the language to be able to communicate, because it's vulnerable stuff, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
vulnerable content,
It
because
is.
all of our,
If you recognize that it's outside of who you really are, that it's just a survival strategy, it's not
yeah,
really who you are.
yeah,
The
exactly,
loving, perfect being that is Matt has nothing to do with these things that he's doing to feel safe, right? So if
yeah,
you just see that as just like you said, a coat that the person's putting on, it the Enneagram as a tool helps you to see it's not personal, right?
mm,
It's not about you. It's just something that the person's doing to survive.
yeah, and
It's really helpful.
to have that understanding is really, although it's personal content in relationships, um, to have that language of it's the personality pattern that's in place as a defense mechanism in order. It's like almost like a survival strategy.
Exactly.
I think this is what you were saying before about your brother with an 8. Although it doesn't necessarily change his presentation, but your understanding of where that presentation is coming from is different.
Yeah, because now the 8 is such a great example for me. When I heard that an 8 was a marshmallow with barbed wire around it,
Yeah,
I really was able to see the marshmallow in him. Like
yeah,
now I just feel for him. Like I take the time instead of just reacting. I see this softness underneath
yeah,
that's just in pain and
yeah,
covering it up with this. Or that it's not always necessarily that. Sometimes it's just big because he feels more comfortable running the show. And I can
mm,
just give that its time and then come back and meet him where he is, like help to run the show. So yeah, I think it just helps take it out of this is just Kenneth. This is just my brother. No, this is just his survival mechanism, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when we can see our own patterns, and when we can see the patterns of the people that we love
Hmm.
in their patterns, that can be challenging in a way because we can see how they're almost kind of lost in a way.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. So we can empathize with that
yeah,
instead of just being feeling hurt by it. That's usually
yeah,
what it's for me. I feel hurt by it, or I feel misunderstood, or I feel angry, or just reactive. And if I'm able to not just empathize, see, this is getting into my heart instead of empathizing sensually and just physically. If I can empathize with my feelings, my heart,
yeah,
it's so much better.
yeah, absolutely. Especially if we're engaging with a heart type,
Right.
you know, like
Yeah. And I've
talking
had a
their
lot of
language.
heart types in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. To be able to be able to connect with each other, on a level that we're both able to connect on.
Hmm.
Because what I'm finding with the Enneagram is learning, and it isn't just like with the Enneagram; it's about with anything. There's one thing, like even with my Christian faith, there's one thing reading the Bible. There's one thing reading about Jesus. It's another thing to follow him. There's one thing having the information about the Enneagram, um, and it's another thing to when I say that I'm a head type and you're a body type, and this is what the head types do, and this is what the body types do, like in close relationships, like it's actually it's so profound. It's such a big piece
Hmm.
that a lot of the relational challenges are because we're just coming from different centers or different different perspectives, different survival strategies, and it's so simple to say it, but the reality of it is actually really significant.
It's so huge. And
It's massive.
yeah, and when you just said that, I remembered them saying, and you meet in the heart, right? Like
Mm,
I think that's such a
yeah,
beautiful thing that then both body and mental types can meet in the heart. I think all types really should meet in the heart. It's just heart types need to not get stuck there and not see anything
yeah,
else. But yeah, it's so profound. I agree. Taking
yeah,
off those blinders, you know.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share about being a sexual nine that I haven't asked that you'd like to share?
I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Madeline. Well, I know that you also work professionally with the Enneagram. Can you
Mhm.
share what it is that you do and where people can find out more about your work so they can make contact with you and what you have to offer?
I work as a personal Enneagram coach and I work online for the most part. I've had a few in person clients, but I work with people all over the world on Zoom. And I'm just starting to work with businesses. This is a whole new territory that
Wow.
has happened to me. I didn't even pursue it, and someone picked up my card and called me, and I'm starting to do business groups. So the way you can find me is MadelineRainsEnneagram.com online. I have a website. You can
Brilliant.
sign up there. And I do typing interviews and free consultations if you want to start with that.
Thank you, Madeline. That sounds great. And I'm going to put links to that in the description box below so people can just literally go there, click, and go straight to you. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experience with the Enneagram in general before we close off?
Um, just that I love it, that it's changed my life, and I think I finally found what I can settle in for the rest of my time here. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Madeline, and all that you've shared with us. It's been very insightful.
Thanks, Matt. It's always great talking to you.